Hello. Okay, so we're going to look at Taylor's model now. So Taylor's model came from a research project which was analysing the learning processes involved in teachers becoming interculturally competent. So you might find this interesting because it is based on people like yourselves. So you can see here it's similar to the ones we've looked at previously, that there are stages in them. You can go back and forth, and a little bit like DOS. When you get to the end, you start again, and you go back to the beginning. So it's like a constant learning program. So again, we'll look at each stage in turn. So the first stage is setting the stage. So this is kind of the background of it. So what the people brings to each new intercultural experience that contributes to learning readiness. And that can be something like their previous important events, personal goals, and previous intercultural experiences and training. So you can see how even when someone's got to the end, and then they go back and they start again in this setting the stage, but they're bringing with them their previous experiences. And that can act as the impetus for more learning, but it does create that background for them. So the next stage, I'm not going to try and say this word, but it's the point when someone is experiencing uncomfortableness or unease in the setting, but it's important and it's required for change to occur and to become interculturally competent. So I'm sure you've heard the expression sit with the discomfort, or, it's okay to be uncomfortable. And that's what this is looking at. And it's common, like we all have those periods in our life where we have periods of dissonance, and that can cause a lot of stress and intense emotions. And in this, we're talking about intercultural competence in Taylor's model. Things like that can be intensified by gender, marital status, by race, but it's made easier by previous experiences, which includes language competency. So basically, the more someone knows, the more understanding they have, the less of that uncomfortableness they will struggle with. Sorry, I've lost my mix. So, cognitive orientations. So there's two different types of cognitive orientations. So similar again to the previous two we looked at. There's a lot of kind of thought processes go into it. So the non-reflective, I'll start with, is when a person doesn't question their own beliefs, their own assumptions and values, and just kind of takes it as a given that this is how it is. But there is also the reflective orientation. So they question their own beliefs, they question their values, they question their assumptions, and it leads to deep critical thinking, leads to having more cultural competence. Sorry, excuse me. And so when the person has had that previous stage of being uncomfortable and having that unease, they can then choose, do I want to reflect on it? Do I want to be non-reflective and refuse to question it? And you saw at the beginning in the model that you can go back a step. So perhaps when they move on to this and reflect on it and they say, you know what, I'm not interested in this. I don't want to kind of question my own beliefs. I don't want to think too deep about this. They might go back a step and keep kind of going back and forward until that point of reflection and go, well, hang on, I do actually want to explore this. I do want to think in more depth. That's the hope, I suppose, that we can all develop more intercultural competence. So the aim is to reflect, to be reflective, to think about one's own cultural beliefs, one's own assumptions, the own values, and as we talk about a lot in this module, our own biases, whether they're known or unknown, and how we can challenge them in an educational setting, as teachers, as educators, and think about those critically. And that helps to develop in this setting an intercultural competence. So this is 4 and 5 of Taylor's model. So these are behavioural learning strategies. So they are in 3 subcategories. So the first ones is the observation. So it's watching what people do and kind of performing the same actions. You know that not like children. The thing that springs to mind is that the children copy what other people do to learn, and it's that same thing, modeling behavior. And then participation. So someone might choose then to take that little step further forward, participate in cultural activities, like trying to join in, buying local food, buying food that's different to the type they usually have, going to shops that sell food that isn't what they would usually eat, trying new things, trying new clothes, trying new hairstyles, those kind of things, just stepping outside their comfort zone a little, seeing what it's like. And then we're moving on to what is probably more stage 5, is that committing. So it's being able to commit to these new changes that they've moved into, being able to actually develop relationships within the culture, that maybe they've built friendships, that they have kind of found a new favorite drink or a new favorite food, or relationships can mean so many different things. But the important thing is that they are finding things within another culture that have reduced their stress and reduced their fear of a different environment, and created long-term links to other cultures. And again, that leads back into that knowledge, the understanding, and that respect. So the final one of Taylor's is the evolving of intercultural identity. So this is their identity has evolved, and they've started to adopt the perspectives and the values of another culture. The view of the world changes because they have more understanding of how other people live, how other people, how they enjoy it. They have new friendships that they may not have thought they would have before. Their personal values change, probably become more, they probably add new values. They have increased confidence, and especially in an education perspective, rather than being fearful or nervous or being stressed about having to kind of to manage all different cultures and how will I do all these different things. They have confidence because they understand, they spent time learning, they have knowledge, and then they have a changed worldview, and I've already said that it makes they have a better understanding of how things are, and they become a lot more comfortable and a lot more effective. So then they can, of course, they can go back to 1, but by the time they get to the point where maybe it's a new school year, or maybe 5 years down the line, and they're having to restart this, but they already have all this knowledge behind them, so it's that bit easier every time. So similarities in those models. So they had the empathy, the knowledge. All of them talked about skill development. All of them talked about cognitive. All of them talked about active listening, cooperation with different people in different cultures, and personal development. And I think other things that perhaps were notable there is that it's understandable to be stressed and to be unsure, but it's important when you're trying to develop, or a person is trying to develop intercultural competency, to try to understand and to try to develop your knowledge to the best of your ability, to be curious, and to, maybe it is uncomfortable, maybe you would prefer to, or a person would prefer to just step back and just keep things the way that they've always been and have the knowledge you've always known. But sometimes learning that a little bit more opens the door and makes everything an awful lot easier for you and for the students in your care. So those are the 3 competencies, or the intercultural competencies, that I wanted to share with you. So as I said at the beginning, you will choose 1 or 2 or maybe 3 of these for your assignment, and you can use those as frameworks for your assignment in whatever way you choose, or you might decide to go and find a completely different one, but this is a start for you. So I hope you learned something. Any questions, let me know, and we will talk about it all again when I see you. Okay, bye-bye.